Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, September the 15th, 2021. It is currently 4:03 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. Yes, it's been a few days. I decided not to come up here on Monday. My plan was to come here yesterday afternoon, but things change. So now it is Wednesday. We're not having in-person services tonight. So I am here to do a couple of hours of live broadcasting. Hopefully try to produce some things that will be beneficial, challenging, edifying. And I hope that that's what occurs. I'm going to do my very best. Now, because I wasn't here Monday or Tuesday, that means this week's Bible study exercise has really, I hope, has given you a little bit more time maybe to read the text for yourself, to use the curriculum, to spend some time doing your own study instead of just relying on me doing some podcast episodes, really giving you a couple of days there just to really, breathe in the text, feed upon the text, meditate on the text, and hopefully it has proven to be very, very beneficial. I have received a number of very interesting emails in regards to this section, people sharing their own struggles, maybe with mental health issues or with discouragement or with depression, which is obviously very much appropriate considering the text we are studying this week. So I've really appreciated people being just very open and honest and transparent, and hopefully just spending this week thinking about some of that. Hopefully it has been helpful to you as well. A lot of people have sent me, someone sent me an outline, which was very helpful. Another person just sent me all of their work and assignments, looking up the specific places I told everyone to study. They found a lot of good information. They checked a number of sources. So a lot of positive developments, at least on that front this week. Hang on. I don't know why my iPad started playing an episode of the Theology Central podcast. That was scary. Okay, just all of a sudden it just started playing. All right, so, but that was very encouraging on that front, and I apologize for that. I was like, whoa, where is that sound coming from? And, but hopefully, I guess I can't speak for everyone else. So let's do this. Obviously, if you don't know where we are this week, this week has been dedicated to 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. If for some reason you're new, welcome to the Bible study exercise. This podcast series is dedicated to trying to get you from being an active listener, a passive listener to an active participant. That's what we're trying to do. I do this by, in the podcast, I do some teaching. Then I leave some things for you. I give you assignments. Some things I teach like I know. Some things I teach like I don't really know, trying to get you involved in the process. And we're trying to find a group of people who are committed to actually studying the Bible day after day, week after week. We are committing, and one passage, what we're doing is taking one passage and committing it to a week of studying that into one passage for an entire week. I think that's very helpful and beneficial. It gives you time to really dig into the text, and hopefully people are benefiting greatly from it. We have a curriculum that is free for you. All you have to do is go to theologycentral.net, go to the blog section, look for the article called Daily Discipleship Guide, follow the link, register, and you have access to the adult study guide, to the daily discipleship guide, and to the leader's guide for both of those booklets. Feel free to use everything all of that to supplement what we do here in the podcast. And the previous ones, I've done pretty much a podcast every single day. Like for a week of study, I've done 6, 7 podcasts, a minimum of 5. And so this week we're going to get maybe fewer podcasts, maybe Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll do extras depending on, again, Every week, it's a challenge to know exactly what to do and what's best. what's best for you. I do a lot of reading the emails, trying to go, I think maybe I should do this, or well, maybe I shouldn't. And so I'm always trying to get that. And of course, if there's anything you need me to do an extra study on, or anything you have questions, you can always ask. But for this week, I keep looking at the text, just trying to go, what should I do? How should I proceed with this? Really trying to figure out what I think is the best approach, because we're dealing with a text that has been preached on 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 times. This text has been preached on. It has been quoted. It's been referenced. It's been talked about in books, podcasts, sermons, Sunday school lessons, small groups. It's one of those passages that is so well known that I'm like, okay, what can I bring to this discussion that will be beneficial? Hopefully, our first study was, I think it was a good way to start. I really do. I think it was a good way to start, getting you to look at some very specific things and doing some research. I think that was a great way to start. And now what we're going to do is we're going to back up just a little bit, and I'm going to do a little bit of what I asked you to do. I'm not going to do it I'm not going to do it as a complete way as I asked you, but hopefully while we work through this together live on the air, hopefully it will add, and maybe I'll point out some things that maybe you saw, maybe you didn't see. Maybe I will emphasize some things that maybe you did not emphasize, and hopefully it will be beneficial. As always, if you're listening live, you can add your thoughts and your perspective to anything that I have to say today. So are you ready? All right, we're in 1 Kings chapter 19. Now, if you remember correctly, I'm gonna close that screen so that it doesn't do that anymore. All right, you see here, I've got an article. I got 2 articles open here. Yeah, here we go. I got 2 articles that we're going to be referencing in a minute. But for now, we'll set that aside. 1 Kings chapter 19. And remember, I decided to go back to 1 Kings chapter 18 and include verse 46 in our discussion this week, our study this week. And the reason I decided to do that, some may be curious, some may not care, but I just want you to understand why, is I just see that there's a lot of emphasis on location and place, that Elijah's going to go here, then he goes here, then he ends up sitting under this. And it just seems that the text is offering some very specific details. And whenever a text offers those kinds of details, maybe it's just to be informative. Maybe it's just to inform you of something. Maybe there's a spiritual significance to it. Whatever the case may be, to me, when it's emphasizing something, it's at least that's a sign that we need to pay attention to it, right? We may come to the conclusion that it's just for information purposes, or we may, once we start digging and going, wait a minute, I think maybe there's something here. We will have to see what we uncover over the next ever how long we're going to be live on the air. All right, are you ready? Here we go. 1 Kings chapter 18. Let's go back to get a little context here, all right? 1 Kings chapter 18. If we go to verse 42, if we go back to verse 41, okay, well, if you go back to verse 40, 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 40, I know I keep backing up, but if you go back to 1 Kings 18:40, we'll get some context. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. All right, this is the killing of the prophets of Baal. We've talked about how just disturbing and difficult that is to read, but it's there, and so we had to deal with it. Verse 41, and Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees, and said to his servant, go up now, look towards the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. All right, now we haven't spent a lot of time taking this apart. It's a lot of interesting things going on here. It's interesting that after the great slaughter, he tells Ahab, go up and eat and drink. Now, I could be wrong here. But it almost seems like Elijah feels like, hey, after Ahab has seen all of this, clearly he's going to repent. Clearly he's going to realize the error of his ways. So it's almost like, hey, you can just go up and eat and drink. We're going to move on from it almost, at least it feels at least a little bit like maybe Elijah thinks everything's going to be better now. Everything's going to change. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So then he goes up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth, put his face between his knees, told his servant to go up now, look towards the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. We have this, again, interesting 3 times, 7 times, this repetition, these numbers that show up. And again, we could take this apart in greater detail. It's not really a part of our text, but it gives us context. And it came to pass the 7th time that he said, behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea, like a man's hand. And he said, go up, say unto Ahab, prepare thy chariot, and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain, and Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Now, it's interesting that, again, he's like, Ahab, go get some food. Hey, Ahab, you need to go ahead and leave now before the rain stops you. It's almost like he's being, after considering the great, conflict, the great contest between Elijah and the false prophets of Baal, and then those prophets are slaughtered. It just seems that Elijah is being very considerate. Hey, go get you some food. Hey, go ahead. The weather's going to get bad kind of vibe. And it's just an interesting, maybe you don't see anything significant there. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I think it adds some context here. Okay. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Now, this is interesting. It seems that the description is here. Ahab rode and went to Jezreel, right? So it sounds like that Ahab basically was in a chariot, most likely. In a chariot, he's riding, most likely in a chariot, or a horse of some kind, and he's riding there. But Elijah runs. He runs to Jezreel. Now, why does he take off running to Jezreel? Why? It just seems odd. Okay, you go ahead. Okay, now he takes off. Okay, I'm going to take off. He's trying to beat Ahab there? A lot of questions. But let's start with one of the assignments I gave you, all right? Jezreel. Is there any significance to this location? What do we know about Jezreel? Let's just see if we can discover a few things about Jezreel. So what I have here in front of me is the Bible Dictionary. I'm using Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Many of you have already referenced this, and you wrote down what you discovered in it. But if you're listening live today, and if you have your copy of the dictionary, open it up. We'll go back through some of this, and I'll just point out some what I think are some interesting developments here. All right. The first thing I thought was interesting is Jezreel. According to the Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary, the name Jezreel means God scatters. God scatters. Is there any significance to that? Is there? You can tell me your thoughts. Some of this I'm gonna give away some thoughts. Some things I'll just throw out there. I think it is interesting that that's the name, Jezreel, God scatters. Now we would have to confirm that with a number of sources, because sometimes you'll pick up one dictionary and they'll say, oh, the name means this, or the name of this place means this, and you'll get 3 other dictionaries that will give you completely something opposite, okay? So you can look it up and see if you can find confirmation of that. It's the name of 2 people, 2 cities, and a valley or plain in the Old Testament. So it's a name of 2 people, 2 cities, and a valley or plain in the Old Testament. So we have to figure out exactly. We know that obviously they ran to Jezreel. They didn't run to a person. So we know it's a place. So which city, what exactly is this referring to? Well, here's what we know. Jezreel, number 1, the first thing it references a man of the tribe of Judah. And we read about that in 1 Chronicles 4:3. Okay, that's not helpful here. Number 2, it's a symbolic name given by the prophet Hosea to his oldest son. The name Jezreel signified the great slaughter that God would bring on the house of Jehu because of the violent acts he had committed. 2 Kings chapter 9. Now that's interesting. So in Hosea 1:4, this is the name Hosea gives his son, and it's a symbolic name. And the name Jezreel signified the great slaughter. Now, it's just interesting that 450 people had just been slaughtered. And where does Elijah go? He goes to Jezreel. I'm not saying that we need to read anything into that. I just find it interesting. Just find it interesting. I'm not saying it signifies anything. Just think that that's an interesting thing to point out. All right. It's a city in the hill country, and it of Judah. We read about it in Joshua 15:56, and apparently David obtained one of his wives from this place, and we read about that in 1 Samuel 25:43. So a city in the hill country of Judah. Well, I think we could immediately rule this one out just from a logical perspective. Ahab is the king of Israel, divided kingdom. He would not be running to Judah. All right, so I doubt everyone would be running to Judah. So that leaves us to the next one. A city in northern Israel, on the plain of Jezreel, about 56 miles north of Jerusalem. The city was in the territory of Issachar, but it belonged to the tribe Manasseh. Joshua 19:18. It was between Megiddo and Beth Shean, 1 Kings 4:12, and between Mount Carmel and Mount Gilboa. The palace of King Ahab of Israel was situated in Jezreel. Here, Jezebel and all the others associated with Ahab's reign were assassinated by the followers of Jehu. The city of Jezreel has been identified with the modern Zarin. All right, so this has to be the one because the palace of King Ahab was situated in Jezreel. This is in Jezreel. So this is a city in northern Israel on the plain of Jezreel, 56 miles north of Jerusalem. All right, and then it gives you some basic location. This seems to be the place. This seems to be the place. That's where the palace is. This seems to make sense. That makes sense that Ahab would be going there. But the question is, why would Elijah be running there? He just had a showdown with the prophets, right? He just slaughtered 450 of them. Why would he go run to that location? That's where Ahab is. That's where the palace is. Why would he go there? Now that to me is the kind of question a good Bible student should ask. I was waiting for someone to email me this week to ask that question. Well, why would he run there? Of all the places he could go, why did he run there? I'm gonna read 1 King. I keep saying 1946, 1846. I'm going to read this from a number of translations just to kind of get you the idea of what's going here. And then we're going to look at some commentaries, all right? So the New International Version. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. So this one seems to imply that the reason he ran ahead of Ahab, this was something supernatural. Ahab's riding, probably in a chariot. Elijah's running, and he runs ahead. Is this something supernatural happening here? Do we need to pay attention to this? The New Living Translation. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. He outruns him. One's in a chariot, being drawn, obviously pulled by horses. The other one's running. This is a supernatural thing. Why? Why? First, not only why is he being given supernatural strength to outrun him, why is he running to Jezreel, of all places, after everything that just happened? Again, it seems, and I could be wrong, it seems to indicate that maybe Elijah feels like, hey, after everything that's just happened, he's going to repent. Everything's going to be great. Is he? It just seems. Now you could argue he's going there at the direction of God. Yes, we could possibly make an argument there. ESV, at the hand of the Lord and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Had to sneeze there really quick. I'm sorry, but I think I was able to mute that. All right. Berean Study Bible. And the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. King James, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So all of them give you the basic idea, but I just find it interesting that he outruns him and he runs to Jezreel. Why? I mean, do you have any clue? It just seems odd. Now, I'm gonna at least rely on one commentary here. I'm gonna go to the pulpit commentary. That's what I'm going to run to. Not run physically, but that's what I'm going to pick up and look at, all right? And it says, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. The same expression is found in 2 Kings 3:15, Ezekiel 1:3, Ezekiel 3:14, Ezekiel 8:1, Ezekiel 33:22, also Exodus 9:3, Judges 2:15, Ruth 1:13, Acts 11:21, Acts 13:11. Some of the commentators understand the words of divine guidance, some of a supernatural strength. All right, so some just think, oh, this is just divine guidance. God's hand was upon him, guiding Elijah to Jezreel. Others see it as, no, he was being given supernatural strength to run ahead of him. It just seems that, can a person outrun a chariot? Maybe they can. I mean, I don't know. I've never done an extensive study on which is a faster means of transportation, running or riding in a chariot. But how far of a run was it? That would be interesting, right? Because if it's a very long run, you would assume Elijah that this would be supernatural strength. If it's not a long run, maybe Ahab would have to stay on paths, trails, some kind of a road, because he's in a chariot, where Elijah could just cut through anywhere. So is it guidance or is it strength? We'll get some more information and see what we can find out here. There is no need, according to the pulpit commentary, to exclude either interpretation. An impulse from on high impelled him to gird up his loins and go with the king. A strength not his own sustained him while he ran. The distance across the plain to Jezreel is about 14 miles. The royal chariot would drive furiously, and whatever fleetness and endurance the prophet had acquired in the wilds of Gilead, it seems hardly likely that after the fatigues and excitement of the day, he would have been able, without the hand of the Lord upon him, to keep ahead of the chariot horses. Now that makes sense. 14 miles. Yeah, you would think at 14 miles, trying to run 14 miles after everything, there's no way he was going to outrun the chariot. It doesn't seem to make any sense. But it's here in the text, so we have to deal with it. And I know you may be saying, but it doesn't matter. Oh, it may matter because it may signify. Remember, this sets up what's getting ready to happen. We're still trying to figure out how Elijah goes from standing in front of 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of the Grove, standing in front of all of these prophets, standing in front of Ahab, doing all of this, slaughtering the prophets, this great confrontation, the power of God, all of this amazing scene that we've all read and studied, last week, to what we read this week, where he becomes so discouraged, despondent, and depressed that he wants to die. What happens? So we're looking for any clue to understand it in the text. All right? Remember we spent a lot of time trying to unpack his attitude that I'm the only one. Well, now this is just interesting. Hey, Ahab, go up and get something to eat and drink. Hey, Ahab, you need to leave now because it's going to rain. Oh, wait, let me run before Ahab. I'm going to go to the same place, the same location. Why? Why would you want to it looks like you would want to run away from Ahab, not run along with him, run before him, race him to the same place to where his palace is situated. It just seems well, put it this way, one of those things in the text that should make us stop and pause and go, what in the world is going on here? The pulpit commentary goes on to say, we got to find out where we stop. Okay. He ran before Ahab. Okay, now I'm not reading everything. I'm skipping certain things here. You can look up the pulpit commentary. It's free online if you're looking for it. He ran before Ahab. Now, they quote from another commentary, mentions an interesting illustration of this incident, which he witnessed the forerunners of Muhammad al-Pasha kept just ahead of the horses, no matter how furiously they were ridden. And in order to run with the greatest ease, they not only girded their loins very tightly, but also tucked up their loose garments under their girdle. But such a spectacle is of common occurrence in the East. So the idea of someone, taking up their clothes, their robe, tying it under their belt and running ahead of horses like this is somewhat, I guess, something that happens at times. But again, it's 14 miles, so I don't know if it explains anything. All right. This seems interesting. According to this other example that they speak of that's happened, Muhammad al-Pasha, that supposedly someone witnessed this occurring, they said his object was apparently twofold. First, to honor the sovereign whom he had the day humbled in the presence of his subjects. So their argument is one of the reasons Elijah may have been doing this, and I guess maybe there's something to do with tradition maybe, is that he's running before the horses as a way to honor the sovereign. Hey, in other words, he just, in a sense, humiliated Ahab. Now he's going to show him some kind of honor by you're in the chariot and I'm going to run before you, basically as a lowly footman, as a kind of a servant. Maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe. See, it says, first to honor the sovereign whom he had that day humbled in the presence of his subjects. The great prophet, by assuming the lowly office of a footman or forerunner, would give due reverence to the Lord's anointed, like Samuel on a somewhat similar occasion. And they say, see 1 Samuel 15:30-31. We won't look at that now. So was this a way to honor Ahab and to show humility? Hey, I know I just embarrassed you in front of everyone. I know I just slaughtered 450 prophets, but let me still demonstrate that I have honor and respect to your office. I still have honor and respect to you as king. Maybe not to what you've done, but to the office. Is that what's going on here? Again, there's just a lot here we don't know. That's where you have to start doing a lot of speculating. Let's see here. Secondly, he may have hoped by his presence near the king and court to strengthen any good resolves which the former might have made and to further the work of reformation, which he could not but hope the proceedings of the day would have initiated and would have begun. So maybe he's like, okay, look, after everything that's happened, maybe Ahab's willing to start change his mind. Maybe he's going to reform some of his ways, and I want to be right there close. I'm going to stay right here next to the chariot, right here before the horses. I'm going to be right there to continue on any reformation that this may have brought about. Maybe, now the pulpit commentary doesn't say this, maybe he was so hopeful that was going to happen. He wanted to follow or in a sense, run ahead of Ahab to show honor and respect, to show humility, but he just believed, maybe Elijah believed that Ahab, that we're going to get there and Ahab was going to, institute all kinds of wonderful changes and getting rid of idolatry and thought that's what was going to happen. I don't know. It just seems interesting. That this tribute of respect would be grateful to Ahab, who hitherto had only regarded Elijah as an adversary. It is impossible to doubt, and that Elijah believed he had struck a death blow to the foreign superstitions fostered by the court, and especially by the queen, is equally certain. It is not clear, as some assume, that the servants accompanied him on the road. He may have rejoined them later on the day or night to the entrance. So, we don't know exactly. We may not know exactly what's going on. Was he humbling himself? Was he showing that, hey, This is all going to work out. This is wonderful. This is great. Everything's changed. God has shown himself. God has proven himself. So clearly now Ahab is going to humble himself, repent. Everything's going to be different in Israel now. Everything's going to change. Everything. Maybe he was so excited thinking that revival was about to break out, using maybe a term that we would use, that a spiritual renewal was about to break out. And so he took off running. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Chapter 19, verse 1. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Now, I don't know exactly why Elijah takes off running to Jezreel. I don't know, but I don't think he was expecting this to happen. I don't think he was expecting that Ahab was going to go in and just say, hey, this is what occurred, and not institute any change. There's no sign of revival. There's no sign of change. There's no sign of being humbled. There's no sign of repentance. There's no sign of defeat. He's like, he goes in and tells Jezebel exactly what has occurred. Now, okay. I was, the pulpit commentary gets into some technical things about a possible textual variant there that we won't get into right now, but that's what occurs. All right. So Elijah is he hanging out somewhere in Jezreel, waiting, hoping, expecting to get some good news? I don't know, but the next verse, everything seems to change. 1 Kings 19:2. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. As soon as he hears the news, he runs for his life. It's almost like he ran to Jezreel expecting, his expectation. He was excited. He may have thought, God has proven himself. God has demonstrated himself. I mean, what more could be done? I mean, after that mighty display, what else can you do? I mean, what other sermon can you preach? God has shown himself. God has shown himself sovereign. God has shown himself all powerful. God has shown the false deity Baal is fake and false. He has demonstrated it through stopping it from raining. He's demonstrated for what he just did in the contest with the prophets of Baal. The prophets of Baal have been slaughtered. Clearly, Baal is nothing before the true God. What more can be said? What more can be done? What more can be preached? Nothing. And after all of that, Elijah gets a message. It's not a message of national repentance, of fasting, of tearing down anything connected to Baal, tearing down high places, tearing down the groves, tearing down altars. No, he gets a message that, hey, you're going to die. And I'm going to read this from a number of translations. All right? I'm going to read verse 3 from a number of translations. Here we go. New International Version. So we really get an idea of what's going on here. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. New Living Translation. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. ESV. Then he was afraid and he rose and ran for his life. I mean, it's a complete, he just ran to Jezreel. He just ran there before the chariot. He just ran there 14 miles. Now he's there. He gets a message. Now he takes off running for his life. The place he just ran to, now he's running from. The one that seemed to demonstrate, hey, I'm the only one and I'm going to stand here, right? You choose today who you're going to serve. And now he's running for his life. What happened? I'm going to look quickly at the pulpit commentary to see if they offer anything here. Okay, they talk about some of the different translations, but they seem to give the idea that he feared is a correct way of understanding what's happening here. Okay, some commentators do not like the fact of saying he was afraid. One commentary says, it is inconceivable that the man who had that day faced alone king and priest and the entire people should have become all at once afraid of a bad woman. And he explains Elijah's flight as caused by the discovery that he could not carry on his work of reformation and by the absence of any intimation that he was to stay and hazard his life. All right, so some say that he wasn't afraid. He just realized it was time to go. You can go through all the commentaries and look at the different interpretations here. I'm going to say he was afraid. And the reason I'm going to say he was afraid is because he runs and lays down, he sits under a tree and says, I'm ready to die. That just seems like he's so emotional here. I think the running to Jezreel seems to indicate that he really thought everything was going to be different. He ran to the place where the palace was, and then he gets a message and finds out it's almost, think about it this way. Okay, God has demonstrated. There's been no rain for 3.5 years. God has demonstrated himself. The prophets have been killed. I mean, what else can be done? Obviously, everything is going to work out now. It's like you think that your expectations are so high, and then all of a sudden you find out that it's all, and in some ways, feels like it's all been in vain. In some ways, it feels like it's all been a useless attempt to accomplish something because nothing changed. They're going to kill you now. They're still just as committed to their false worship and their false gods as they were before the confrontation. You did all of this. People have suffered. All of these things have happened. And what? Where are you? Nothing. Nothing to show for it. No great revival. No great repentance. All you've experienced is the slaughtering of prophets, and now the people committed to the religion are just as committed to the religion. I think it's fear, it's discouragement, it's depression, it's frustration. I think you can pretty much throw in any emotion there. And I can understand the emotion. I can understand I think you should be able to understand that emotion. I mean, I can feel that on just a normal day. Spend 3-4 hours in an empty building, teach, broadcast, podcast episode after podcast episode. Okay, man, that was 4 hours of teaching today. And then sometimes by the next day, I'm like, that was a waste of time. I didn't do a very good job. That was useless. That was pointless. Why am I even doing that? Let's just get rid of the podcast. I'll just sit at home and do it. And then I can start having some of those same feelings. So clearly, after all of that, you can see why he would be like, what's the point? So he went, and when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah. So in other words, he gets out of Israel. Ahab's the king of Israel, and he runs back to Judah. And he goes to Beersheba. All right, let's look up this location, see if there's any significance here. Let's see if there's any significance to this location. All right, I'm going to look it up in the dictionary. All right, see here. I'm going to make sure I find it. Okay, yeah, Beersheba. Where is it? I know it's here somewhere. Here we are. Let me find it. Beersheba. Here we go. Beersheba. Let's see here. This is interesting. Beersheba, well of the seven, or well of the oath, seems to be the meaning here. That's interesting. The chief city of the Negev. Beersheba was situated in the territory of Simeon, and was at the limits of the tribe of the children of Judah towards the border of Edom in the south, midway between the Mediterranean Sea and the southern end of the Dead Sea. Beersheba was considered the southern extremity of the Promised Land, given rise to the often used expression from Dan in the north to Beersheba, or from Beersheba to Dan. In Beersheba, Abraham and Abimelech, king of Gerar and Philistia, made a covenant and swore an oath of mutual assistance. Abraham pledged to Abimelech 7 ewe lambs to bear witness to the sincerity of his oath. From this transaction came the name Beersheba, all right, because it connects to 7, it appears. It was in the wilderness of Beersheba that Hagar wandered as she fled from Sarah. Abraham dug a well and also planted a tamarisk tree here. And he returned to Beersheba after God prevented him from offering Isaac as a sacrifice on Mount Moriah. At Beersheba, a number of important encounters took place between God and various people. Here, God appeared to Hagar, Genesis 21:17, Isaac, Genesis 26:23 through 33, and Jacob, Genesis 46. Ancient Beersheba has been identified with a large tract known as Tel Es-Saba, situated about 3 kilometers or 2 miles east of the modern city. And that's where we have it. So we don't get a lot here. Probably the most significant thing is there was a lot of encounters with God in this area. A lot of encounters with God. Now, it seems by going back to Judah, he's trying to get out of Israel. So that seems to make sense. Maybe the reason he goes here has nothing to do, maybe there's no spiritual significance. It's just like, I got to get out of Israel, and he ends up in Beersheba. But it is, I think, interesting that in Genesis, a lot of important encounters with God occur in Beersheba. Now, what I would challenge you to do is look up every time that there was an encounter in Beersheba with God, and what was the emotional situation that leads to that encounter? Is there any similarities to those situations? Now, Hagar, because one of the situations here, one of the times that someone has an encounter with God here is Hagar. Clearly, she's an emotional situation there, all right? Then we have Isaac. Okay, what's going on? And Jacob. All right? So look at those situations. Are all of them emotional situations? If they are, then that's interesting, right? Because clearly here Elijah is an emotional situation. He goes to Beersheba and he's going to have an encounter here. He's going to have an encounter here. So he gets to Beersheba. He leaves a servant there. All right? Well, I guess, all right, you know what? I take this back. So the encounter doesn't really happen in Beersheba, but he goes to Beersheba. Right? Because then he takes then he went a day's journey into the wilderness. But is that considered the wilderness of Beersheba? So is it still in the general location? Is it still connected enough that it's still significant that he has an encounter with God here? You want to be as fair as you can with the situation. All right? And he came and sat down under a juniper tree. He sits down under a juniper tree. Now, is there any significance to that? So running to Jezreel makes sense. He runs to Jezreel because it seems that maybe Elijah feels like that this is going to be, everything's going to change now. And then he has to flee Jezreel. He has to flee Jezreel. Right? He has to take off. He runs for his life. He goes to Beersheba. Kind of interesting because it seems like that there's been a number of encounters with God at Beersheba. We could look at the emotional situations and all of those encounters, and you can see what you find. And then he takes a day's journey, and he finds himself under a juniper tree. A juniper tree. Now, it's interesting that they name the text gives us Jezreel, gives us Beersheba, and gives us even the kind of tree he sits under. Now, those are the kinds of things that sometimes when I see in a text, it's like, is this just for information purposes or there's something here? Now, I cannot confirm what I'm about to say. I cannot 100% confirm this. I'm going to say that I have one source that states this, but I have not been able to verify it in other sources. But I will throw this out there and see what you think. All right? Our thinking caps on. All right, I want you to hear this because I was doing a lot of research here on all of the locations, trying to figure it out. But this one, I thought was super interesting, okay? All right, let me pull this article up. All right, here we go. The juniper tree is believed to possess the ability to cleanse and make us pure and true to ourselves, according to at least some cultures. The juniper berries possess a unique property, and they are used in the cleaning rituals, which are commonly used to remove evil spirits, and they also help to protect people from evil. Now, does he sit down under a juniper tree because he thinks that offers it some kind of protection? Well, that would be kind of more superstition, and he's just confronted false, worship. So I don't know. I think it's interesting, but let's continue. All right. Now, this is interesting. Juniper was a symbol of the Canaanites' fertility goddess, Asherah or Astarte in Syria. Asherah. We've heard that name before, have we not? In the Bible's Old Testament, a juniper with an angelic presence sheltered the prophet Elijah from Queen Jezebel's pursuit. Now, I just think it's interesting that the tree is connected with the fertility goddess Asherah. Now, remember, we talked about Asherah, the groves being built by Ahab, and that when the Baal and Asherah would come together, that would bring rain. So he's had this massive confrontation with the prophets of Baal. He's had this confrontation. He wins, and he finds himself under a juniper tree that happens to be associated with the very thing he has, in a sense, defeated. Now he's under it. Now, I don't want to read that too much into it. I don't want to make it too symbolic, but it's interesting. So he runs to Jezreel. Then he has to scatter from Jezreel. He goes to Beersheba, which there's connections to people having encounters with God. He finds himself under a juniper tree, which just happens to be associated with the very religion he's been fighting against. He's under it. He's under the very tree that is connected with the gods that he defeated, but now he's under it, and he is discouraged, he is defeated, he's despondent, he is depressed, he's suicidal. Now, is that a coincidence? Now, I have no way of being dogmatic that the juniper tree is connected with Asherah and with the fertility gods. We probably could do a little bit more research and see if we can discover that. But if it's true, is that just not crazy? He's under it. No, you have defeated it, but now he's under it. He's discouraged because it feels like he was defeated, right? Because after everything happened, Jezebel's like, you're going to die. So Jezebel, in a sense, won. The false religion won. All of his efforts were in vain. All of his efforts were a waste of time. All it resulted in is 450 people being dead, but the religion is alive and well. He didn't destroy it. He didn't stop it. All of that, it was for nothing. And now he's underneath a juniper tree. I cannot 100% prove that as of right now, because I didn't want to 100% prove or disprove it right now. I wanted to throw it out there because if it is, that to me is an interesting picture. He runs to Jezreel, then he has to scatter from it. Then he goes to Beersheba, which is connected. So maybe he's in like the wilderness of Beersheba, and he finds himself not only physically under the juniper tree, but emotionally, he's in a sense been defeated and under the very things he has fought against. And then we know what he does here. He takes a day's journey to the wilderness. He sits down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die and said, "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." It's just crazy that the juniper tree could be connected with that. Now, there's other information I could get you about the juniper tree. I'm not going to go into that now because all of it's just very basic stuff. But that to me jumped out, and I thought that was interesting. And again, you can do your own research and see if you can confirm or deny that. Now, one other thing we need to figure out today. I thought we were going to get further, but that's okay. We're just walking through this. This is exactly the way the Bible study exercises are supposed to work. We're just talking through it, trying to get you involved in the study. I want to know why Elijah says, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. The New Living Translation is interesting here in 1 Kings 19:4. It translates it this way. Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who have already died. So in other words, is he saying, they're already dead. I'm about as useless as they are. They're dead. Just go ahead and kill me because I'm no more valuable than dead ancestors. The ancestors that are died, that's me. I'm about as useless as them. Is he saying that? Let's see what any of the commentaries offer any interpretation to this phrase. One commentary reads this. The exclamation is characteristic. Evidently, he had hoped that he himself was better than his fathers. As a servant of God, singled out beyond all those that went before him to be a victorious champion of great crises. He and he alone. Now he thinks his hope vain and sees no reason why he should succeed when all who went before him have failed. Why, he asks, should he live when the rest of the prophets have died? So they think that this goes back to all of the things I pointed out. Hey, I'm the only one. I'm it. I'm the one who's going to stand. Somehow that I'm going to succeed where everyone else has failed. Somehow maybe I'm better. Maybe I'm better equipped. But now he realizes that he's no better. They all died. They didn't stop false religion. They didn't stop false idolatry. They didn't stop any of this. He's no better. Maybe he felt that he was better, and now he realizes he's not, and now he is defeated and discouraged. That's how they interpret it. Another one, let's see if, this commentary, they don't even bother to address the issue, which is very interesting. They just completely ignore it. Let's see if any of the other commentaries handle this. I am not better than my fathers, that I should continue when other prophets who have gone before me have lost their lives. So they interpret it as, hey, the other ones lost their lives and were killed. Well, I'm not, there's no point in me going on. They died. It's time for me to die. But again, why, if Jezebel say that one, I have a hard time trying to understand that interpretation. Why would he be asking God for him to die if he knows Jezebel's going to kill him the next day? Why take off running? Just stay in Jezreel and die the next day. So that one doesn't make any sense. See here. I am not better than my fathers. I am a mere weak man, no better nor stronger than they who have gone before me, no more able to revolutionize the world than they. Maybe he just realized, to me, he just seems, maybe this really strengthens the idea that whole I'm the only one really was him not having a correct understanding of the situation. And now he's like, well, I thought I was the only one, and clearly it doesn't matter because I'm no better than those. Now, maybe he really thought he was going to be used in a way that no one else had ever been used before him. He was going to be the one to revolutionize the thing. He was going to change everything. He was going to bring false worship to an end. And he realized that now he isn't. See here. Okay, yeah. So a lot of these don't offer really a lot of. Yeah, that most of these really don't have a good answer here. A lot of them don't really have a good answer. I find it interesting that it's like, hey, I'm no better than them. I think when you look at the way some of the translations translate it, it seems to carry to me the idea, hey, they died and they didn't stop everything. They didn't stop false religion. They didn't stop idolatry. They didn't fix everything. I'm no better than them, so I just as well die now. They're dead. I'm about as useless. I'm alive, and I'm about as useless as they are dead. They're dead, and they can't do anything. Well, I'm alive, and I'm no better than them, so just go ahead and kill me. Now, again, how that doesn't seem, let me make it very clear. That doesn't seem like, and I want you to try to grasp what I'm trying to say here, because I got to be very careful, because I don't want it to sound like that I'm not saying, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but we have to at least consider this. Does he really want to die? Because if he really wanted to die, there was no reason to flee. Like, why did he run for his life? If he wanted to die, all you needed to do was just stay right there in Jezreel. Okay, hey, send the message back. I'll be here in the morning. Just come ahead and get me and kill me. It doesn't matter anymore. I don't care. I'm not better than anyone. She can just kill me. But he ran for his life, and he's hiding under a juniper tree. So is it like, does he really want to die? Or is this more? Sometimes you can express, what's the point of going on? I don't care if I die. You can say that, but those words are not really about, you're not really saying that you want to die as much as you saying, what's the point? It's useless. Nothing matters anymore. It's more of expressing complete depression, discouragement, and defeat. Sometimes you can say something that sounds like you want to die, where you don't really want to die. You're just expressing in the strongest words that you can come up with that it doesn't matter. It's all useless. It's all vain. It's all a waste of time. Who cares if I die today? It doesn't matter. Maybe it's expression. He's expressing the futility of what he feels that his life has been vain and futile, because he's been fighting against Ahab, been in a sense in a battle against false prophets. And when it's all said and done, a miracle can occur. Everyone can see the power of God. 450 prophets are slaughtered. But you know what? I get a message the next day that Jezebel's going to have me killed. So what's the point? It's all useless. Just let me die. I don't know if it was to express true desire to die, because he ran for his life. So clearly he wants to live. But expresses how utter futile he feels the situation is. And maybe it does capture a little bit, hey, I'm the only one. And now I'm no better than maybe he thought he was the only one. Maybe he thought he was going to be used by God in a way that no one else had, and he was going to do more than anyone else has. I'm not saying that was arrogance. I'm saying he may have just really believed that God had been doing these miracles and showing himself in these powerful ways, that this was it. And he just witnessed an amazing miracle. This has to be the thing that's going to fix the situation. And then he runs to Jezreel, boom, scatters, runs for his life, gets to Beersheba, goes out into the wilderness, sits under a juniper tree, which is connected with connected in at least some way to the very idolatry he was fighting against, demonstrating that he had been, in a sense, now discouraged and defeated by the very thing he was supposed to be fighting against. Now, there's a lot more we could say, But I think we get a couple of maybe principles here. Once again, we talked about this before. Elijah's perspective is, I think, have been wrong through a lot of this. I think his perspective that he was the only one was wrong. I think his perspective that now everything was going to be better, at least we think that that's what he was thinking. We're not guaranteed that. I think was wrong. He now thinks now it's all over. What's the point? I have no point of living. Just let me die. I'm no better than my fathers. That his whole perspective has been wrong. And this is so very, very important in your spiritual life. When your perspective about anything is flawed or wrong, it can be detrimental to your spiritual growth and advancing spiritually. We have to have a biblical perspective. We have to have a correct, anything where our perspective is incorrect usually leads us to spiritual defeat and ruin. We must always have a biblical perspective, because all other perspectives will lead us to spiritual ruin and failure and a fall. It will lead you there. And I don't know where you can have the wrong perspective about what God should and shouldn't do. You can have a perspective that, well, now that I'm a Christian, God is going to heal me. God's going to fix this. God's going to fix that. And when that perspective is wrong, you end up, who knows where you end up? All I can do is share the story that I've shared multiple times, but let me share it again. I was a very new Christian. I became a Christian. Things in my family did not get better. Things in my family got worse and worse and worse until I found myself no longer living with my family, but living in another home. And this is back when I was a teenager, for those who don't know the time. I was living with another family because things had gotten so bad. I won't go through all the details, but just a horrible situation. And my Christianity was not helping it. And in my mind, Christianity should make it better because now God's involved and God will fix it, right? But no. I'm not living at home. And then I'm sitting at Gymnad High School, about 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now. The principal comes overhead and tells me and my brother to report to the principal's office, and we are told you need to get to the hospital in Abilene, Texas, which is about the hospital on the north side of town, so about 24 minutes away, and we need to get there as soon as possible. I arrive at the hospital. I go, I think it's the second floor, come off the elevator, take a ride. I can almost literally walk you through where I went that day because it's ingrained in my brain forever. And I walked into the room and nobody in my family would talk to me because of how bad the situation was. But I walk into the room and there's my mother, and basically one side of her body is gone. It's not moving. The other part of her body is kind of twitching, almost like in a seizure. And basically, she had an aneurysm, and it was over. I mean, for all practical purposes, she was dead, but they could not pronounce her dead until they had 3 brain waves showing no activity. So that was on a Friday. Now, as soon as I left there, I went into the hallway and started smashing stuff and lost my temper. Was not happy. I spent all night in a church begging and begging and begging and pleading God and begging God and begging God and pleading God, please, please let my mom be okay, where at least we can reconcile. I can talk to her one more time so that we can fix everything. Please, please. And what even makes it worse is that was on Friday when we got the call. On Wednesday, she had called me and told me that on Sunday she wanted me to come over for dinner. I think there was hopes of some kind of reconciliation, but guess what? We never got to Sunday because by Friday it was over. So I spent all night in the hospital, in a church. I stayed at the church all night, praying. And guess what? Well, Monday morning she was dead. She wasn't healed. She didn't walk out of the hospital. She never regained consciousness. There was no restoration. There was no reconciliation. There was no forgiveness. There was no working out any of our problems, and it was over. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I trust in God. God is all powerful. I believe in God, and this is how it all turns out because my perspective was all flawed and how I thought things were supposed to work. And so how did that all turn out? That was in October. In November, I'm kneeling down on a floor with a gun and stick it to my head and getting ready to pull the trigger to kill myself because I can't take it anymore and I don't want to live anymore and I'm done with it. What's the point? Because my perspective was God was supposed to do what I wanted him to do. When your perspective is wrong, it always leads to problems in your spiritual life. Whatever your perspective is, it can be a perspective about anything. I have a seizure disorder, right? I didn't ask for the seizure disorder. I didn't go looking for the seizure disorder. It was granted to me because of the United States military putting a vaccine in my arm. Now, I'm not anti-vax in any way, shape, or form, but the anthrax vaccine almost killed me. And now I have seizures and I have neurological issues, all because of what happened. I'm not anti-vax, but that vaccine, I was one of the very few that had, I was the only to have that kind of reaction to the vaccine. And I had to go to the Vaccine Health Center in San Antonio, Texas, and they clearly linked it to the vaccine. They acknowledged it. The military tried to cover up. We can go through the whole crazy story. But I still have issues all the time with that. Sometimes you hear the issues and my lack of ability to communicate as clearly as I would prefer to. Sometimes you may hear the results of it. I hate it. It's caused me so many problems in my life, not to make any excuses, but it's caused me major issues. Okay. Any sin that I've committed, obviously I bear the responsibility. Can't blame it on that, but it's just caused me lots and lots of problems. But guess what? If I don't maintain a correct perspective about it, that can be detrimental to me spiritually. It can be about a sickness. It can be about a tragedy. It can be about a situation. It can be about circumstances. We must maintain. And I'm not saying that Elijah ends up in this situation somehow. How did he end up? Maybe his perspective was, this miracle is going to fix everything. Was that Elijah? Look at the history of Israel. How many times have they seen miracles and it didn't fix everything? Why would you think this was going to be different? You kept saying you're the only one, which wasn't true. What? There's hints there that his perspective was wrong. And to me, him sitting under the juniper tree, it's just, I'm not saying this is the purpose of it being in the text, but it just serves to me symbolically that now after everything that's happened, he's almost like he's defeated by the false religion. But no, God is still sovereign. God is still above the false religion. God is still God, and Baal is not God. Asherah they're false gods. But it feels like he's been defeated by a false religion. But no, God is God because his perspective is flawed. Sometimes we find ourselves sitting under the situation, sitting under the circumstances, defeated by it, and we forget that God is still sovereign. But sometimes our perspective is, if God is sovereign, then he's going to fix the situation, but he doesn't always do that. I don't know. The whole thing is super, super interesting, but I'll leave that there. We went an hour and 5. We've covered a lot there. 1 hour and 5 minutes. I'm just going to stop, all right? That's exactly the way the Bible study exercise. We just work through the text together, throwing out ideas and thoughts, giving you information, and, well, you can tell me, well, hopefully it sparks conversation because that's the way it's supposed to work. All right, I'm just going to stop right there. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. There you go. I could continue on and can continue to preach, but I'll leave it there. And hopefully at least the group that's committed to study, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on all of this. All right. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.